So, dear guests, dear colleagues, dear friends, we are here today for the second day of the first annual Ukraine Innovation Days here in Ukraine House in DC, the event organized by Ukrainian House and Embassy of Ukraine in United States of America. For those of you who are here for the first day, I want to say that yesterday we opened this amazing event. We discussed with our friends and colleagues why it is so important during the war to discuss innovations, why it is the best way for Ukraine to be resilient, to be strong, to win the war and to win the peace. And today we will have three very interesting discussions, three panels about different aspects of this. We will start now with a panel which will be moderated by Kailey, Leinz. I'm giving the room to you. Please enjoy the day.
Thank you and welcome everyone. We're going to kick things off today talking about banking and economic growth in Ukraine, both currently amid the war and then also the effort toward reconstruction and recovery. Joining me here on the stage, Andrii Pyshnyi, who is the governor of the National Bank of Ukraine. Just next to him, Scott Nathan, the CEO of the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation. Chair Reta Jo Lewis of the Export-Import Bank of the United States. Julie Monaco, global head of public sector banking at Citi. And Karen Fang, who is global head of sustainable finance at Bank of America. So thank you all for being here. Obviously, as we are in Washington, D.C., Governor, I'd like to begin with you as there's been a development just in the last day. It does seem that finally, potentially, an aid package for Ukraine will be passing the House of Representatives as soon as this weekend. And in part, it's military aid. But this bill also includes a $9.5 billion economic assistance program for Ukraine that would come in the form of a forgivable loan. How important is it that Ukraine receive that money, and what's the likelihood that that loan would ever be able to be repaid?
Good morning. Let me speak Ukrainian and Inga with translation. Thank you. Мені дуже приємно бути сьогодні тут, і я вдячний, що ви витратили свій ранок на те, щоб поспілкуватися з нами і почути про Україну.
I'm very pleased to be here, and I want to thank you for spending your morning to come here and to talk to us.
Також хочу подякувати посольству за фантастичний прийом вчора і сьогодні. Ви зробили неймовірний івент.
I also want to thank the embassy. Yesterday and today you made an exceptional reception.
Дійсно, ми очікуємо на цьому тижні важливої для України події – ухвалення відповідного законопроекту, який відкриє фінансування української перемоги.
Indeed, this week we are waiting for a very important event, adoption of the bill that will open the way to Ukraine's victory.
Власне, я сприймаю як голова Національного банку це саме так.
As a central bank governor, this is exactly how I see it.
Адже ті ресурси, які ми отримуємо від наших партнерів, вони підживлюють нашу спроможність до супротиву. І все це заради нашої перемоги, ми в неї віримо.
Because all the resources that provided by international partners, they fuel our capacity, and this is the way to our victory.
Через це молимося за те, що Конгрес ухвалить правильне рішення, і ми почнемо і надалі крокувати туди, де ця війна завершиться нашою перемогою.
So we pray that the Congress makes correct decision, and we will follow to the place where our victory is.
Я хотів би декілька слів сказати щодо України і, власне, того, як ми зараз забезпечуємо безперебійну роботу. Сподіваюся, вам буде цікаво, тим більше, що наш досвід, він може бути корисний.
And I would like to tell you about Ukraine, how we ensure continuous operations. I think this experience might be interesting and useful for you.
За 2023 рік, де зустрічав статистику, Україну було атаковано більш ніж 7 тисячами ракет.
Over 2023, Ukraine was attacked, I read the statistics, by more than 7,000 missiles.
Нещодавно президент Зеленський у своїх зверненнях до українців назвав жахливу цифру. За березень місяць Україну атакували 400 крилатих ракет, 600 бойових дронів і 3000 керованих авіаційних бомб за один лише місяць березень.
Recently, in his address to the nation, the President Zelensky provided horrifying statistics. Just in 1 month, March 2024, Ukraine was attacked by 400 missiles, 600 drones, and more than 4,000 guided bombs.
За декілька днів до візиту в Вашингтон я відвідав Харків. В той день, коли я там був, туди прилетіло 12 ракет С-300.
Just a couple of days before my trip to Washington, I visited Kharkiv. And on that particular day, the city was attacked by 12 missiles X-300.
Вони атакували енергетичну інфраструктуру, яка під цим протягом місяця знаходилася під таргетованою атакою і фактично вже зруйнована.
They attacked critical infrastructure which was under targeted attacks before, and as a result it is practically fully destroyed.
Атака тривала з 4 до 5 ранку.
This attack lasted from 4 to 5 a.m.
Місто було знеструмлене, але о 8 ранку 121 банківське відділення відкрились для клієнтів.
The city was cut off the electricity, but at 8 o'clock, 121 bank branches opened their doors for customers.
У ці відділення прийшли працівники. О 8 ранку в ці відділення прийшли клієнти. І робочий день розпочався в умовах повного блекауту.
So at 8 o'clock, so the staff of branches started working and clients came to branches despite the fact that there was a full blackout in the city.
Це наш проект Power Banking.
This is our power banking project.
Це проект, який народився восени 2022 року в бомбосховищі Центральної будівлі Національного банку, коли Росія вперше таргетовано атакувала енергетичну інфраструктуру.
This project emerged in October 2022 in the shelter of the headquarters of the Central Bank of Ukraine, National Bank of Ukraine, when Russia made its targeted attacks on critical infrastructure.
Тоді ми зрозуміли, що повинні забезпечити безперебійну роботу вже в нових умовах.
And we
Коли
realized
немає світла, коли немає, можливо, зв'язку, коли є потреба забезпечити інші протоколи грошового обігу.
We realized we had to ensure continuous operations in completely new conditions when there is no power supply, where there is no connection, and where we have to apply new protocols of cash circulation.
Це була важка для України зима. Перша зима, коли росіяни атакували енергетику.
That was a heavy winter for Ukraine. First winter when Russians attacked a power sector.
І тоді ми вирішили, що не менш ніж 35% банківських відділень повинні функціонувати в Україні за будь-яких умов.
And then we decided that at least 35% of the entire bank network has to function under any condition.
Системно важливі банки підтримали цю ініціативу.
Systemically important banks supported our initiative.
Це унікальний досвід кооперації банків, коли не конкуренція стала пріоритетом, а навпаки солідарність і кооперація. Сьогодні понад 50% усіх банківських відділень пристосовані до роботи в умовах блекауту і перебоїв зі зв'язком.
And this was a unique situation when the banking system was driven not by competition, but by solidarity and cooperation. And now more than 50% of the banking system joined the project to ensure continuous operations despite blackouts and no connection.
Я часто повторюю, що в кризовій ситуації ми опускаємося до рівня нашої підготовки, а не піднімаємося до рівня наших очікувань.
I keep repeating that in crisis situations we sink to the level of our training and do not rise to the level of our expectations.
І в березні місяці ми змогли оцінити, як функціонує система Powerbanking, коли в умовах блекауту 121 відділення в Харкові і в Харківській області, а заразом з ними і в Запоріжжі, в Дніпропетровській, в Сумах, тому що перебої з електроенергією відчуваються і в цих областях, відкрилися і почався звичайний операційний день в умовах військового стану.
This March, we managed to make sure to prove that it really works when 121 bank branches opened in Kharkiv. Same situation was in Dnipro, in Sumy, in Zaporizhzhia, because there were also power cuts there. So we see that now we can function under any conditions.
Ці банківські відділення забезпечені автономним електропостачанням, резервними каналами. Вони мають посилену інкасацію. Вони розуміють, як побудовані нові протоколи в умовах, коли ця банківська мережа функціонуватиме в рамках протоколу об'єднаної діяльності.
All these branches are equipped with autonomous power generators, with autonomous satellite communication sources. They know how to have the enhanced cash collection. They know the protocols when they operate as a united chain of bank branches.
Простіше кажучи, якщо станеться так, що в Україні не буде можливості функціонувати в банківській системі, ці відділення, які належать різним банкам, працюватимуть як одна спільна загальнонаціональна мережа.
To make it simple, to put it simple, if it happens that the banking system is not able to operate normally, these branches will operate as branches of the united single nationwide bank.
Якого банку ви були до цього?
Regardless of which bank was your service bank.
В той момент, коли необхідно, ви будете клієнтом мережі Powerbanking.
When needed, you become a customer of the power banking network.
Мене не чути?
Чути.
Разом з тим ми пішли трохи далі. І фінансова інклюзія.
Then we made a step forward because we understood that power banking also means financial inclusion.
В Україні зараз працюють десяток мобільних відділень, які рухаються вздовж лінії фронту і обслуговують деокуповані території.
Now in Ukraine we have about 10 mobile branches. These are vehicles that drive along the front line and serve the occupied territories.
Для України це принципово важливо, адже реінтеграція деокупованих територій в наше економічне коло, в нашу економічну сферу є дуже важливим і для тих, хто там знаходиться, і для української економіки в тому числі.
This is very important because reintegration of the occupied territories in our financial system is critically important both for the people who stay there and for the Ukrainian economy as such.
В Україні, як виявилося, є декілька угод, які були укладені в 2020 році з IFC, з Європейським банком реконструкції і розвитку щодо розвитку фінансової інклюзії. Сьогодні ми їх переосмислюємо.
It turned out that Ukraine had several agreements with IFC, with EBRD about financial inclusion development, and now we revise these agreements.
Нещодавно підписали з Європейським банком реконструкції і розвитку угоду, яка передбачає реінтеграцію ветеранів.
We have recently signed an agreement with EBRD that provides for reintegrations of war veterans.
Це величезний процес і величезний проект, який потребуватиме колосальних змін, як у роботодавців, так і на рівні нормативних актів Національного банку, але він неминучий. Ми країна, яка на сьогоднішній день має, напевно, чи не найбільшу кількість ветеранів, які повертаються з фронту після активних бойових дій.
This is a major project. It is very important. It will require significant changes both at the level of employers and at the level of regulations. But it is inevitable because we are now the country that has the biggest number of war veterans who come back from active battles and have to be reintegrated.
Я хотів би нагодою скористатися і подякувати партнерам за цю роботу. Вона є дуже і дуже важливою. Ми мотивовані зробити так, щоб українська банківська система була не лише однією із самих захищених, функціональних за будь-яких умов, а й, можливо, самою інклюзивною банківською системою в світі.
And we want to take this opportunity to thank our partners for this extremely important work we are doing, because we want our banking system not only to be the most protected, the most efficient and operate under any conditions, but also to be the most inclusive in the world.
Кількість людей з інвалідністю вражає. Ця інвалідність набута в результаті обстрілів, в результаті цієї війни. Це діти, це молодь, це жінки.
The number of people with
Ми повинні адаптуватися, і це також частина проекту Power Banking.
The number of people with disabilities is just unbelievable, because people suffer from attacks. They are injured as a result of these attacks and atrocities. These are children, these are young people, women, elderly people, and we have to adapt them all.
І останнє. Зараз під час весільних зборів я часто спілкуюся з колегами, з керівниками центральних банків європейських країн. Великобританії, Туреччини, Ізраїлю. Вони всі дуже цікавляться нашим проектом Power Banking. І сьогодні Національний банк є донором технічної допомоги. Ми розповідаємо, як забезпечити роботу банківської системи за будь-яких умов.
And the last thing I wanted to say that this week, these meetings, I meet my peers from different countries, from European central banks, from Turkey, from United Kingdom. And they are all very much interested in our power banking project, because they all want to know how to ensure continuous operation of the banking system under any conditions.
Ми приймаємо команди, розповідаємо предметно про наші протоколи. На глибокому технічному рівні пояснюємо їм наші рішення. І це вражає.
We accept their teams at our bank. We explain them the system. We give them all the details of the protocols we apply. And so this is quite impressive.
Адже блекаут може бути не лише наслідком ракетної атаки. Він може бути наслідком кібератаки.
Blackout may result not only from a missile attack. It can be a result of a cyber attack as well.
Та й війна, насправді, яка триває в Україні, здається, робить дедалі більш усвідомленим висновок про те, що вона не так далеко від Європи і від її кордонів.
And the war that lasts for the third year now, I think it makes everyone understand that this war is not that far from the European countries' borders.
Нещодавно Національний банк вніс зміни до своєї стратегії, і ми, залишаючись в рамках того мандату, який у нас є, забезпечити цінову, курсову стабільність, фінансову стабільність, дописали одну єдину фразу, яка, мені здається, чітко визначає суть. Всі ці мандати ми реалізуємо за будь-яких умов.
The National Bank has recently amended its strategy, and having retained our key mandate to ensure financial pricing, foreign exchange stability, we just added one tiny phrase. We have to implement our mandate under any conditions.
І за більш ніж 2 роки війни українська банківська система не зупинилася на жодну хвилину.
And over more than 2 years of this war, the Ukrainian banking system has not stopped for a single minute.
Дякую.
Thank you, Governor. And Scott, since you now have the microphone, obviously DFC has deployed a lot of capital in Ukraine over the course of the war. How much of that effort has been directed specifically at the banking system?
Thanks for the question, and thanks to Ukraine House and the embassy here in Washington for hosting this event. It's great to be up on stage with colleagues from the government and our partners from commercial banks, so thank you for that. And Governor, I just want to say congratulations on everything that you talked about. It really is a testament to the resilience of Ukraine. that the banking system has stayed in such good condition despite appallingly difficult circumstances and the aggression from Russia that Ukraine faces. It's an example of overall the resilience of the Ukrainian people in the face of that kind of assault. So congratulations to you, and it's extremely impressive. My institution, the United States International Development Finance Corporation, which is the modernized development bank, International Development Bank of the United States, was involved in Ukraine before the war. We had a portfolio of about 800 million since the war. Mostly in the last year, we've done another $450 million of investing. And in the banking sector, that means support for small business. We've done 4 transactions providing $100 million of loan portfolio guarantees so that financial institutions have the capital they need to fund small and medium enterprises, the engine of growth in any economy, and that's especially true in Ukraine as well, to keep people employed, to keep production up, to create a sense of hope, and to keep the task of economic recovery less difficult by keeping economic activity high. I mean, I think it is not surprising that in the first year of the war, GDP fell so dramatically in Ukraine, but it is impressive how resilient the economy has been since then. I saw that the IMF revised its estimates for 2024 to be 3% GDP growth, 6% estimate for next year. That's incredibly impressive. And the small and medium enterprise sector is key to that. We believe we've mobilized in total about $250 million of capital through our loan portfolio guarantees to that sector. And that's everything from farmers having the seeds, fuel, equipment that they need for the planting season, all the way to small business people, shop owners, cafe owners, and everything in between. We're committed to that. We have a number of other transactions in the banking sector in the works. Our partners in the banking sector are impressively able to continue doing their business as the governor outlined, despite the difficult circumstances, and we'll be there to support them now and far into the future, just as we'll be there to support Ukrainian private business overall into the future.
And Julie, if I could skip down to you, as Citi is on the ground in Ukraine right now, conducting banking operations each and every day, can you just speak to the real-time situation and the challenges you're facing in this moment?
Sure. Well, first of all, I also want to congratulate the governor on everything that was done in the banking system to keep it resilient and going. Citi's been on the ground for 25 years. When the war broke out, we had 300 staff. We worked closely with the central bank. We had to get exceptions very quickly from the central bank to move our backup data center to Frankfurt because we were concerned about how close it was to the main data center. And there was just, they say that, necessity is the mother of invention and innovation. And we certainly saw that real time working closely with the Ukraine government. We have what we're seeing. So let me just give you sort of a snapshot quickly of what we're seeing on the ground today. We have 500 clients in Ukraine today. We bank everybody. We bank the government. We bank financial institutions. We bank all the multinational corporations. I don't know if it was opportune or not, but we opened up a commercial bank the year before the war started. We onboarded 75 new commercial bank clients. So to what Scott was talking about, the resilience of this economy that grew 5% last year, we onboarded brand new clients that are actually have really good business that need to be supported. We have been involved in financing some of the projects that have been happening with the support of EXIM banks as well as with development finance organizations. We financed the rebuilding of a bridge, working with UK EXIM. And Citi's in a very unique position because we have a development finance business that sits in my group that covers every single development finance organization in the world. So we're working with the Japanese development finance organizations who are looking at how they could be doing more to help Ukraine. So we're trying to piece that together. In our conversations with our clients, what we're seeing is there is not a lot of demand for credit right now. The liquidity that is in Ukraine is being reinvested to a certain extent. We've continued to lend to our clients. Capital is recycling within Ukraine, but there's no new FDI coming in. Very little FDI coming in, except what's happening, with the development finance organization. So in terms of private capital, new private capital coming in, and as as the underwriter and facilitator of a lot of the domestic bonds prior to the war starting, we used to support about 90% of the external FDI flows that were coming into Ukraine, so we could see that. But what are our clients saying on the ground? Our clients. It depends on the industry. There's no one solution. And I think where we have to really go with this is really understanding what are the industries that have the needs that can be solved right now. And whether that's the mine sweeping, the construction for real estate, for housing, agriculture, technology, those are all industries. And we see that we're in the process of building out an office in Lviv. There are whole parts of this economy that are performing. And I have to congratulate, another partner in the private sector. Marsh McLennan has done an amazing job in coming up with new innovative products that are allowing insurance to happen. They did it for the Black Sea corridor, but they're also working on other things. And one of the things we were just talking about and we discussed back at Davos is they're building up incredible data about where this economy is performing. And we have to figure out how to take that data and combine it with the DFI data so that we start having a better database that's for public use that all of us could be using with our risk organizations to show where the economy is performing so that we could get more done. Now, yesterday I moderated a panel where we were talking with, it was at the US Chamber of Commerce, where we're talking about the multi-agency donor coordination platform. There was a meeting in Brussels last week about that platform, and this is where all the multilateral development banks are supposed to be coming together, and all the donors to Ukraine are supposed to be coming together. And what do we need to get more done? What we're seeing is little individual projects are getting done, but nothing scalable is happening. And to move the needle, it's scalable. A lot of conversations, and I know Karen's going to talk a lot about the building blocks that have to happen for what happens post-war, and in terms of bringing equity and various capital in for the entire rebuild that's going to happen. We at Citi, I think very much like the government, we're on the ground, so we're very focused on the here and now. We're very focused on the rapid recovery process and the parts of the economy that need financing right this minute, and how to work with our development partners, whether it's DFC, IFC, EBRD, EIB. Believe me, we're working with all of them and trying to innovate. So one of the things we haven't seen, although I have to say I have an exception with DFC. Scott's organization and my organization are working on a transaction right now that we hope that we'll have announced by Berlin, which shows exactly what we've been asking for, which is a DFI product that is enhanced and works very differently, acknowledging that it has to work differently for wartime. And I'm not going to say much more about it, but it's in one of the sectors that is specifically has been raised in the rapid recovery needs of the program that was in the Ukraine, the Minister of Finance's public investment management framework. They prioritize different industries. It's one of those industries, and this is going to be an innovation for a DFI type product. It's something that took a lot of work from Scott and his team to get it approved to do it. If that, hopefully that will be a test case. But we need more of the DFIs to do that. The other is that we need this multi-agency donor platform to be operationalized. Right now, it's a lot of coming together and meeting and talking about how to coordinate donation. But there's two things we need them to do. Operationalize it, and let's start getting in the trenches and talking about how do we piece together guarantees in a way that gets us the risk defeasance needed to unlock liquidity. And I know that, they don't, typically we don't want 100% cover because the private sector has to have, skin in the game. But the reality is that we're going to need 100% cover on certain transactions until we get a track record. And if we get a track record and we use the data as a public good just like the GEMS data that's being published by the World Bank. If we use the data as a public good, I think we'll start having the data to show that there is robustness, there is resilience to this economy, there's parts of this economy performing well, and that we can do a lot more. We also need that multi-agency platform to start engaging the private sector. We haven't seen a lot of private sector engagement from them yet. We're ready. We have 300 people dedicated to Ukraine, split between Lviv, Kyiv, and Warsaw. We're ready to roll up our sleeves, get in a room, and do the kind of innovation at a scalable level that we've been trying to do one-on-one with each development organization. And I think that's what will move the needle.
Thank you, Karen. And of course, Karen, Julie, so sorry. You were name checking Karen, and you also name checked that you've been working with EXIM banks. So Chairwoman, I'd like to come to you next, is I know you just returned from Ukraine, where you announced a rather large deal relating to railroads. I believe it was the first fully funded project by the U.S. government. So can you just tell us more about that and the other work that you have underway?
Well, first of all, thank you. This is giving us an opportunity to be here at Ukraine House, especially just after returning governor, to actually be on the ground with the different leaderships, with all of the donors that were in Ukraine. I was fortunate to be there with our Special Representative Pritzker and Dalip Singh, the National Security Advisor, who led the delegation. And it gave EXIM an opportunity to announce a transaction, an authorization that we had just recently done from our board. We have, like Scott, Export-Import Bank has been in Ukraine for a very long time. We, before the war broke out, had just recently signed a $3 billion MOU around a number of sectors that have already been mentioned here. But shortly after the war, one of the things that became very clear is that what could we do what could we see from a project that would be able to send the right signal that America's Export Credit Agency sees the economy as one where we can do transactions that are going to be creditworthy. We were very fortunate that our ambassador there, Brink, who has really been leading the charge on the ground with the United States government, looking at priority projects, and the rail project was a priority. As one can imagine, it is the leading driver, one of the leading drivers in the economy. It is it is the largest employer. And one of the things that is so significant is that they have not seen the level of disruption because the only ways we all know to get in and out of the country is by train. And so we were really excited to be able to have structured what we believe is one of the most highly structured financing package that we were able to work with the Minister of Reconstruction and also with the Minister of Finance. So we announced a $156 million transaction that we hope to see with WebTech Transportation, which is a company out of Pennsylvania. It is going to go drive the work that we're all doing, creating about 800 jobs right there in Pennsylvania. So to be able to announce with UZ, the rail employer, a transaction like this, we hope it sends the right signal to the market that EXIM, we knew we had to be additional to the transaction, but we also had to make sure the transaction was creditworthy. We were able to be comfortable with that through many, many months of working with the government. And we are standing strong in our work that we want to do with the private sector. I think nothing is more important than to see the private sector players alongside the public sector players who are working in Ukraine. When we were there, we were there only for about 8 hours on the ground. We had a chance to not only work with the donors, with the leadership in Ukraine, but also with those who we think are going to continue to be the drivers. I then left there and went to a G7 meeting. I make mention to this. It was a G7 meeting of ACA heads, and we were able to also reaffirm our additional commitment to working in Ukraine. So I think you're going to continue to see this model that we have employed, that we will work with other ECAs in some co-financing projects. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to leave because I have to go to the U.S. Senate with 2 senators. So really appreciate being here, and thank you for having us.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Appreciate your time. So, Karen, Julie so graciously teed you up nicely for what would be the next stage, realistically thinking about this. There's obviously great difficulty on the ground in real time, and there's bees in the air. How are you thinking about investing in the eventual reconstruction and recovery, and when those opportunities may present themselves, and frankly, how both the public and private sectors need to be engaged in that effort?
Absolutely. So thank you. And I just want to express actually our sincerest respect for the Ukrainian people, for your bravery and determination and resilience. I think what you have accomplished in power banking is simply stated, just extraordinary. So I think it is a playbook for global banking system to think about operating nonstop under any conditions. So that's an inspiration to us all. Obviously representing Bank of America and representing the sustainable finance function that I run globally for the bank, I think the reconstruction of Ukraine cannot happen, will not happen without blended finance. With the public-private sector collaboration that we're talking about, Julie talked about multi-agency donors, we talked about multilateral development banks. I think the 2 represented here, Scott's organization, the DFC, and Rita's organization, EXIM, has had a long track record working with the private sector in deploying capital under extraordinary circumstances. Frankly, we have the playbook that we can actually extend, improve, and amplify for the future. And perhaps some of that project, some of those projects, as Julie mentioned, is not even far into the future. It could happen right now. And we are actually in planning phase on multiple projects, whether it's energy and power infrastructure, agriculture, global supply chain. I think that actually will help continue to revitalize and frankly energize the Ukrainian economy, which obviously will provide political and other stabilities that we must see in the replanning phase. So one of the things that we actually have done with DFC was in 2018, we actually have done a blended finance transaction to help clean up nuclear waste and provide storage. And those templates, again, simple templates, political risk insurance, getting rating agencies involved, making those securities investment grade. So large investors, not just banks like ourselves, but also global capital markets can be deployed, because that's where hundreds of trillions of dollars of assets is in the public domain, in the stock market, in the bond market, in project finance. So I think a lot of those templates do exist. Clearly, we are still in the war. Clearly, there's a lot of uncertainties, but I think the planning can be done very smartly and very quickly, because ultimately there is a huge challenge, right? According to, I think, National Bank of Ukraine and United Nations, the reconstruction as of now is estimated to be about $500 billion. Global infrastructure funding last year was only around $4 trillion. So it is obviously a monumental task, but I think it does represent an opportunity to reconstruct in probably the most resilient, which we talked about, as well as most sustainable way. And I think that is potentially an opportunity for all of us. Coming to the public-private sector, I think a lot of the classic blended finance techniques will be deployed. Obviously, we need a lot of first loss dollars, junior equity capital. That can come from multi-donor agencies. That could come from private equity investors. I cannot tell you the amount of interest coming from the private sector in the infrastructure, in the private equity sector, in actually start co-investing some of these rebuilding, reconstruction projects. The project finance debt market is ready to go if enough de-risking, it can't just be DFC and US EXIM. So that's why today, for example, later on at the UN Foundation, we're co-hosting an event with global multilateral development banks and development finance institutions to create even more de-risking instruments, not just political risk insurance, not just typical loan and principal and interest guarantees. More innovative techniques like that could actually unlock a tremendous amount of private sector capital that can come in and being blended with all these different capital. And I think the last thing I want to say is clearly when we think about, just how much can be deployed, how quickly it can be deployed, I do think for the use of funds and use of proceeds, we need that level of transparency and obviously accountability in terms of the dollars actually being spent on the ground. I think that would encourage further global trust from global capital markets and investor community to start coming in, rolling up the sleeves and contributing to every single part of the capital structure and rebuilding every single sector that's critical to the economy.
And Scott, just quickly, as I know you have to leave us as well, do you have a final thought on what it's going to take to attract more of that private capital into Ukraine?
Well, I think the discussion so far really hits on what's necessary, which is innovative tools to help share risk. For us, that's political risk insurance, that's the use of guarantees, in addition to our equity and direct loans. But I think overall, in order to take the kind of unanalyzable tail risk off the table that operating in this environment entails, I think for private investors who can for sure analyze credit and cash flows and think about business opportunities, we need to find ways to mutualize the risk of war damage, of expropriation and otherwise. And that's why the guarantee tools that have been mentioned, the political risk insurance, is really ultimately something that I think we need to all come together, multiple nations, to figure out how to strengthen those tools. We can, as DFC, chip away at it in the hundreds of millions and even in the single-digit billions. But when we're talking about tens or hundreds of billions, that's a completely different matter. Thank you for the opportunity to participate. Sorry to have to run.
It's all right. Everybody's busy here in Washington. Thank you, Scott. Appreciate it. And Governor, especially as we're talking about having to attract private capital and to have the confidence of investors, whether they be equity investors or credit investors. Obviously, Ukraine also does have about $20 billion in debt. That the suspension of those payments will be coming due in September. How are you thinking about that? Is there going to need to be a restructuring in order to maintain that confidence? How is Ukraine thinking about that right now?
Дякую за це запитання. Воно є насправді дуже важливим, але я перед тим хотів би не менш важливу тему підняти, пов'язану із страхуванням військових ризиків.
Thank you for this question. It's very important indeed, but before answering it, I would like to raise one not least important area. This is war risk insurance.
Покриття військових ризиків відбувається сьогодні в рамках швидкої потреби для того, щоб Україна отримала достатній притік приватного капіталу, покриття цих ризиків і змогла відновити свій експортний потенціал. І я хочу подякувати партнерам за активність в цьому питанні. Але ми працюємо на довгострокову перспективу.
Currently, war risk insurance is actually arranged, on demand, and when we need to, urgently arrange transportation export corridor or to enable capital inflow. And I want to thank the partners for this opportunity. But on the other hand, we are working on a long-term perspective.
Мандат Національного банку розповсюджується не лише на банківський сектор, але й на страховий.
The National Bank of Ukraine mandate covers not only banking, but also insurance sector.
Нещодавно Рада фінансової стабільності, до складу якої входить Національний банк, Міністерство фінансів, Міністерство економіки, всі фінансові стейкхолдери узгодили концепцію страхування військових ризиків.
And recently, the Financial Stability Council, which includes the National Bank of Ukraine, Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Economy, other financial stakeholders, adopted a concept of the war risk insurance.
Ця концепція була розроблена разом з міжнародними партнерами, зокрема зі Світовим банком, і ми віримо, що після того, як вона стане робочою моделлю, яка буде закріплена законопроектом, розробка якого зараз триває, це створить довгострокову модель страхування військових ризиків, тому що це наша нова реальність.
And we believe that this model, when it is adopted by as a legislation, as a draft legislation, I'm sure it will create this long-term model of war risk insurance because we need it. This is our new reality.
Ця модель передбачає створення державою відповідного агента, який покриватиме частину цих ризиків. Взаємодія з міжнародними партнерами, міжнародними страховими компаніями. Не буду зараз вдаватися в технічні деталі. Сподіваюся, в червні місяці ми презентуємо законопроект.
And this model, it actually provides for establishment of a state agency that will ensure this risk insurance. Probably I will not get into the details now. I hope that in June we will be able to present this concept.
Тож це перша частина відповіді на ваше запитання, що ми робимо для того, щоб приватний капітал, навіть попри те, що війна триває, прийшов в Україну.
So this is the first answer to a part of your question, what we do in order to enable private capital inflow in Ukraine.
Ми хочемо закріпити страхування військових ризиків і робочу модель на інституційному рівні.
We want to establish war risk insurance and at the institutional level.
Єдине, що ми не можемо змінити, це географію.
The only thing we can't change is geography.
Східний кордон так чи інакше передбачатиме, що поруч з нами будуть знаходитися доволі небезпечні сусіди.
Our eastern border means that in one way or another our dangerous neighbor is next to us.
Наступне питання пов'язане із пом'якшенням обмежень, які Національний банк на рух капіталу повинен був внести з початку повномасштабного вторгнення для того, щоб зберегти макрофінансову стабільність. Ми працюємо над лібералізацією, і вона відбувається в рамках стратегії, узгодженої з МВФ.
Second part of the question is easing of foreign exchange restrictions. The National Bank was forced to impose them at the start of the full-scale war to ensure macro-financial stability. Now we are working on its liberalization, and this is done within the concept agreed together with the IMF.
Але вже сьогодні я хочу, щоб ви почули моє повідомлення про те, що нові гроші, які надходять в Україну, знаходяться поза периметром валютних обмежень. Вони мають абсолютно вільну можливість руху.
But I want you to hear now my message that all new money invested in Ukraine is beyond the perimeter of FX restrictions. And there is a fully free movement.
Напередодні Лондонської конференції по відновленню.
Actually, these amendments were made in June 2023 before London Recovery Conference.
Це принцип нові гроші, нові умови.
This is the principle new money, new conditions.
Разом з тим ми працюємо в тому числі і зараз активно над тим, щоб рухатись далі і вирішити питання можливої репатріації дивідендів, нових дивідендів. І знайти оптимальне, безпечне для макрофінансової стабільності рішення щодо обслуговування старих так званих боргів.
And now we also are considering our next steps. We want to enable repatriation of new dividends, and we're also considering repayment of the so-called old debts, old liabilities.
Я хочу вас запевнити в тому, що Національний банк не буде стояти на перешкоді вільному руху капіталу. Єдине, що нас в цій ситуації хвилює, це макрофінансова стабільність. Жодне наше рішення не повинно її підважити.
I want to assure you that the National Bank of Ukraine will not create obstacles for free capital movement. The only thing that concerns us is macro-financial stability, and it should not be undermined by our decisions.
Саме через це з МВФ ми погодили стратегію, яка базується не на календарних датах і на графіку, за яким відбуватиметься пом'якшення валютних обмежень, а на стратегії створення передумов.
This is why in our program with IMF we agreed that this easing will not be linked to any timeline, to any calendar schedule. It will be based on creation of preconditions.
Приймаючи рішення щодо пом'якшення валютних обмежень, ми беремо до уваги цілу низку факторів. Зокрема,
making decisions on easing of FX restrictions, we take into consideration the whole range of factors, in particular.
Стан валютного ринку, курсову стійкість, множинність курсів. Достатність золотовалютних резервів, ритмічність надходження міжнародної допомоги.
Condition of the foreign exchange market, multiple exchange rates, sufficient receipt of of financial support from abroad.
Зараз ми бачимо можливість зробити деякі наступні кроки, і я переконаний, вони вам сподобаються.
Now we have the opportunity to make some further steps, and I'm sure you will like them.
Ми наразі над цим дуже активно працюємо, тому що розуміємо, наскільки важливо, критично важливо доповнити міжнародну суверенну підтримку участю приватного капіталу у відновленні країни.
We do it because we understand how important, how critically important it is to complete international sovereign support with private capital.
Ми хочемо повертати, попри війну, ринкові відносини.
We want to restore market relations despite the war.
Ми хочемо забезпечити баланс між ринковими відносинами і необхідністю забезпечити макрофінансову стабільність попри ризики війни. І поки що нам це вдається. І я вважаю, що макрофінансова стабільність – це і наш здобуток, і в той же час наш з вами спільний актив, який дозволяє дивитися в майбутнє.
We want to
Дякую.
ensure the balance between market conditions and macro-financial stability, and so far we managed to do it. And I think that this is our achievement, our joint achievement, and our asset that we are implementing and we are realizing despite the war. Thank you.
We're technically a bit over time, but Julie or Karen, do you have any response to what we just heard from the governor?
Just some final thoughts.
Sure.
Karen talked about the fact that we're going to need to scale blended finance, and that this is not unique to Ukraine. We've been talking about blended finance for 10 years in terms of how to scale blended finance. And so we're going to have to continue to innovate. And I applaud what you're doing with the multilaterals. We're trying to do the same thing. Maybe we should team up. We've got to get the multilateral banks to come together and piece together their guarantees, enhance their products, make them resilient to a war environment, like the transaction we're working on with DFC. But we also have to be very, very eyes wide open. Infrastructure as an asset class in the emerging markets has not taken off for a few reasons. One is that there are concerns about rule of law and how things work in emerging markets, not just Ukraine, and Ukraine is trying to address that with the reforms that it's putting into place. We've had our clients tell us that one of the things that would accelerate that the fastest would be accepting adjudication from the EU courts. And if we could get moving on that, that would be one thing to unlock it. The other is an area where we're innovating at Citi. Someone on my development finance team said, let's turn in all this trapped liquidity, which is necessary for financial stability, local currency, and lend it to the development banks instead of just let it sit with the central bank, so the development banks can get more projects done right now. And we launched that product with EBRD in the fall. And we did a transaction with them. We're working on our second transaction. And just this week, IFC called us and said, we heard about this product. Can we start borrowing local currency from Citi so we can get projects done now? So we need more innovation.
For sure, completely agree with Julie. I guess my last few thoughts, having heard all the remarks, is that I do think technology, which helped power banking, can play a major role in infrastructure reconstruction. And when you think about even just AI and technology's role on being very smart about power generation and transmission, right? Really forecasting demand and thinking about using storage very wisely instead of building infrastructure the old way with a co-peaker and things like that. We can actually kind of leapfrog as we think about this and build a cheaper, more resilient, and more efficiently. So that's thought number one. So I do think we cannot underestimate the cost savings and, frankly, the speed improvement by using technology very efficiently. The second thing is, obviously, as Julie said, I do think it's important to note the global south is, emerging market is an unsolvable problem, not just for net zero, but also for global economic vitality. So it is very, very important to think about different solutions. I think in addition to local currency borrow that Julie just talked about, there's tremendous amount of will, frankly, that's needed for direct lending from development banks and development finance institutions to crowd in private sector early, start not at the post-close phase and syndicate 10% to the private sector. And that's one of the things that we are absolutely, by the way, this is where solidarity is required, because private sector wants to help, but given that we're all regulated, we need this type of de-risking, project preparation, securitization. You heard World Bank chief talk about securitization mechanism. That's true and tested in mortgage market, in auto market, in student loan market, over and over in global capital markets. That is, again, a playbook that's not new. We just have to apply it with the right tranching, structuring, and that's what we're good at. So I think crowding private sector early and start changing the whole AB loan structure, that's something else to think about as well. Last but not least, again, I think it's just given the amount of challenges ahead, I think it really is an area of collaboration and solidarity, and frankly, no competition is required. And this is where we actually very much look forward to working with everyone to get this done.
It's a wonderful ending note. Karen Fang of Bank of America, Julie Monaco of Citi, and Governor Andrii Pyshnyi of the Ukrainian National Bank. Thank you both, all of you, for joining us.